The ship was dying. Commander This Velcora knew it the way a mother knows when her child is sick. She could feel it in the floor beneath her boots, in the way the lights flickered every few minutes, in the deep groaning sound that came from somewhere inside the walls. The sorrow of Keth had been the pride of the Velrothi Ninth Fleet. Now it was barely holding together. This stood on the command bridge and looked at the damage reports on her screen. Hull integrity sat at 31%. 2 of the 4 main engines were dead. The medical bays were full beyond capacity, and wounded soldiers lay in the hallways on blankets because there was no room left. The air recyclers were failing on decks 9 through 14, and the crew there had to share breathing masks in shifts. She was not alone in her suffering. Through the wide observation window, she could see the rest of her fleet drifting alongside her. 97 ships. That was all that remained. 3 months ago, she had commanded 400. Then came the Battle of Orin's Drift, and the Drenari Dominion had torn them apart like paper in a storm. The Drenari were brutal, efficient, and they showed no mercy. They never did. "Commander," said Lirith, the fleet's chief navigator. He was young, barely past his first century, and his silver skin had gone pale from exhaustion. "I have completed the scan of nearby systems." "And?" This asked. She kept her voice steady, even though her heart was heavy. "There is one system within reach, a yellow star with 8 planets. The 3rd planet is habitable, class 12, oceans, atmosphere, plant life." He paused. "It is populated." This closed her eyes. "Classification?" "Category 7, pre-interstellar. They have basic space capability. They have reached their own moon, but nothing beyond that. Industrial civilization, primitive by galactic standards." That meant a young species, still trapped on their own planet, still learning the basics of the universe. Galactic law was clear about such worlds. You did not contact them. You did not burden them with the knowledge of what lay beyond their sky. You certainly did not bring a war to their doorstep. But galactic law had not watched 300 ships burn. Galactic law was not watching her crew die slowly in dark hallways. "How far?" she asked. 14 hours at our current speed." This looked at the damage reports one more time. 14 hours. Some of her ships would not last 14 hours. But the nearest Allied port was 6 weeks away, and they would never make it. Not even close. She made her decision. "Set course," she said quietly. "All ships, take us to Sol 3. The fleet turned slowly, painfully, like a wounded animal dragging itself toward water. 14 hours later, they arrived at the edge of the system. The yellow star was warm and bright, and the 3rd planet was beautiful. It was blue and green and white, wrapped in clouds, shining like a jewel against the black of space. This had seen many worlds in her long career, but something about this one made her pause. As the fleet moved closer, things began to happen very fast. The planet was surrounded by thousands of small machines. Satellites, Lirith called them, primitive observation and communication devices. The moment the fleet entered range, every single one of those satellites detected them. Within minutes, the planet below erupted with radio signals. Thousands of them. Millions. Every frequency was alive with noise. This did not need to understand the languages to know what they were saying. Fear, confusion, awe. "They see us," Lirith said unnecessarily. "Of course they do," This replied. 97 warships are hard to miss. She watched the planet's surface through the long-range sensors. She could see military vehicles moving, aircraft taking off, ships at sea changing course. The whole world was reacting at once, like a body flinching at a sudden sound. Thais knew she had to speak to them before fear turned into something worse. She activated the ship's communication array and connected it to the linguistic AI. The system had already been absorbing the planet's radio signals and building a translation matrix. It was not perfect, but it would do. She took a breath and spoke. People of this world, we are the Velrathi. We come from far beyond your star. We are not invaders. We are not conquerors. We are wounded. Our fleet has suffered a great defeat, and we are dying. We ask only for time and for raw materials so that we may repair our ships. We will not harm you. We will not take from you by force. And when we are able, we will leave your world exactly as we found it. This is our promise. She ended the transmission and waited. The bridge was silent. Everyone was watching. Hours passed. The radio signals from the planet continued, but now they were different. Fisk could hear the tone changing, even without translation. There was argument, debate. Some voices were angry, some were afraid, some were something else entirely, something she could not quite identify. Then, nearly 48 hours after her message, a single transmission came back. It was on a clear frequency, strong and direct. The linguistic AI translated it in real time. Velrathi fleet, this is Earth. We have received your message. We have discussed it among ourselves. We understand that you are damaged and in need of help. There was a pause. Thys leaned forward. Tell us what you need. Thys blinked. She had expected conditions. She had expected suspicion, demands, threats. She had prepared herself for the possibility that they would be told to leave. She had even prepared for the possibility that the primitive world would try to attack them, which would have been sad and pointless. She had not prepared for this. 4 simple words, offered without hesitation, without conditions. Tell us what you need. Thys looked at Lirith. He looked back at her with wide eyes. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Commander, Lirith finally said, what do we do? Thys turned back to the screen, looking at the blue planet below. She did not know yet what kind of people lived down there. She did not know their history, their nature, their hearts. But in that moment, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. We tell them what we need, she said, and we see what happens. What happened next would change everything, not just for the fleet, not just for the war, but for the entire galaxy. Because the people of Earth did not simply help them. They did something far more extraordinary. Something that no one, not the Velrathi, not the Drennari, not the ancient races of the Galactic Council, had ever seen before. But that was still to come. For now, Thys simply stared at the beautiful blue world and allowed herself, for the first time in months, to breathe. Thys sent the list down to the planet on the second day. It was long and detailed. She needed hull-grade metals, titanium, iron, nickel, and aluminum, in large quantities. She needed conductor compounds for the power systems. She needed chemical coolants for the engines. She needed organic materials for the medical bays, things that could be processed into medicines and tissue repair gels. The list went on and on. She estimated, based on what she knew about Category 7 civilizations, that it would take the people of Earth somewhere between 8 and 10 months to gather even a portion of what she needed. That was fine. She could keep the fleet alive that long if she was careful. It would be slow and painful, but it was possible. 11 days later, the first shipment arrived. Thys stood in the cargo bay of the Sorrow of Keth and watched as human transport shuttles docked, one after another. They were ugly machines, loud and graceless, burning chemical fuel and shaking violently as they connected to the docking ports. But they were full. Every single one of them was packed with materials. Tons of refined steel, aluminum ingots stacked like bricks, drums of chemical coolant, crates of organic compounds, carefully labeled in a language Thys could not read, but which the AI translated in real time. 11 days, not 10 months, 11 days. How? Thys asked, and she was not ashamed to admit that her voice shook. The answer came from a human woman named Dr. Elena Vargas, a materials scientist who had been sent up with the first wave of supplies. She was small by Velrothi's standards, barely reaching Thiss's chest, with dark hair tied back and eyes that were sharp and restless. She spoke quickly, as if there were never enough hours in the day for everything she wanted to say. "We retooled," Vargas said simply. "Steel mills in Pennsylvania, refineries in India, mines in Australia and Chile. Governments talked to each other. Factories changed their production lines. People volunteered for extra shifts. Some of them haven't slept in a week." She shrugged as if this were normal. "You said you needed help, so we helped." Thiss did not know what to say. In 30 years of military service, she had dealt with dozens of species across the galaxy. She had seen generosity and she had seen cruelty, but she had never seen anything like this. An entire planet, a species that had never even met another intelligent race before, mobilizing everything they had for strangers, in 11 days. And that was only the beginning. Within the first month, human engineers arrived in orbit by the hundreds. They came in small, rattling shuttles that looked like they might fall apart at any moment, wearing bulky spacesuits that were laughably primitive compared to Velrathi equipment. But inside those suits were people who burned with a kind of energy Thiss had never encountered. They asked questions, endless questions. They pulled apart damaged hull panels and studied them. They sketched diagrams on paper, on screens, on the backs of their own gloves. They argued with each other, constantly, loudly, waving their hands and raising their voices, and then suddenly they would agree and work together in perfect coordination, as if the argument had never happened. A young engineer named Reo Tanaka, a civilian from a country called Japan, became a familiar face on the Sorrow of Keth. He was quiet compared to the other humans, but his mind was extraordinary. He spent 3 days studying the ship's repair systems, then came to Thiss with a proposal. "Your repair drones are good," he said. "Very precise, very careful, but they work alone. Each one does its own job without talking to the others." He held up a small device, a tablet showing a simulation. "We have something called swarm logic. It lets machines work together like a group, sharing information, dividing tasks, helping each other. I have designed new drones using your blueprints and RAI. They can cut your repair time by 60%. Thiss looked at the simulation. The drones moved like a school of fish, flowing around damage, each one knowing exactly where the others were and what they were doing. It was beautiful. "Build them," she said. Meanwhile, Dr. Vargas and her team had done something even more remarkable. They had taken samples of the damaged Velrathi hull alloy and studied it in their laboratories, both on the surface and in makeshift labs they had set up in orbit. The alloy was advanced, far beyond anything humans had created. But Vargas did not see it as something to admire from a distance. She saw it as a puzzle to solve. Within 3 weeks, her team had not only learned how to produce the alloy, they had found a weakness in its molecular structure, a tiny flaw in the way the atoms bonded together under stress. It was a flaw the Velrathi had known about for centuries, but had accepted as unavoidable. Vargas did not accept it. She used a human technique, something called friction stir welding, adapted to work at the atomic level, and eliminated the flaw entirely. The new alloy was 12% stronger than the original. "Your people accepted this weakness for centuries?" Vargas asked Thiss one evening, as they reviewed the test results together. "It was considered a natural limitation of the material," Thiss replied. Vargas shook her head. "There is no such thing as a natural limitation. There are only problems that haven't been solved yet." Thiss stared at her for a long time. She was beginning to understand something about humans. They did not see the universe the way other species did. Where others saw walls, humans saw doors that had not been opened yet. Where others accepted what was, humans demanded what could be. It was not just the engineers and scientists who changed things. In the medical bays, human doctors and nurses worked alongside Velrathi healers. The two species were very different biologically, but the humans learned fast. They studied Velrathi anatomy with the same fierce curiosity they brought to everything else. And they did something more. They sat with the wounded. They talked to them, even through the clumsy translations of handheld devices. They brought food from the planet below, strange food full of flavors the Velrathi had never tasted. Some of the wounded soldiers laughed for the first time in months. One evening, Thys walked through a medical bay and found a human woman sitting beside a Velrathi soldier who had lost both arms in the battle. The woman was holding a small device that played music. The soldier was listening with his eyes closed, and there was peace on his face that Thys had not seen since before the war. Thys did not interrupt. She simply watched, and she felt something crack open inside her chest. General Marcus Cole, the military liaison assigned by Earth's emergency coalition, was different from the scientists and engineers. He was calm, measured, and he watched everything with careful eyes. He did not ask many questions about the Velrathi. He asked questions about the Drenari. "Tell me about the ones who did this to you," he said to Thys during one of their meetings. "Why?" Thys asked. Cole looked at her steadily. "Because if something out there is powerful enough to do this to a fleet like yours, we need to understand it. Not tomorrow. Now." Thys studied him. There was no fear in his eyes. There was something else. Something cold and calculating, and very, very patient. She had seen that look before, in the eyes of predators. She told him everything. 6 weeks after the fleet's arrival, Thys sent a report to the Velrathi High Command. She had thought carefully about what to say. In the end, she kept it simple. "The people of Earth are not a Category 7 civilization," she wrote. "I do not know what category they belong to. They learn faster than any species I have encountered. They adapt faster. They create faster. And they do all of this, not because they were asked, but because they chose to. I have no classification for what they are. I only know that I am grateful they chose to help us, and I am grateful they are not our enemy." She sent the message and turned back to the window. Below, the blue planet turned slowly. Shuttles moved back and forth between the surface and the fleet, carrying materials, carrying people, carrying hope. But something bigger was happening. Something Thys could feel, but could not yet name. The humans were not just fixing the ships. They were changing everything, and they were only getting started. The repairs were finished. Thys could hardly believe it, but it was true. In just 6 weeks, the fleet had been restored. Every hull was sealed. Every engine was running. The medical bays were clean and stocked, and the wounded were healing. 97 ships, ready to fly again. Thys began preparing to leave. She drafted messages of gratitude. She organized a small ceremony to thank the human workers who had spent weeks in orbit, far from their families. She felt something deep and warm toward these strange, loud, endlessly surprising people, and she wanted them to know it. Then General Cole asked for a meeting. They sat in the command room of the Sorrow of Keth. Cole brought Dr. Vargas and a group of humans Thys had not met before. Military officers, scientists, engineers. They carried tablets and files and something heavy in their eyes. "Commander," Cole said, "your fleet is repaired. You could leave tomorrow and make it back to the front lines. But I want to show you something before you go." He placed a tablet on the table and activated it. A holographic display appeared, showing a detailed map of Drenari fleet formations, attack patterns, weapon signatures, and communication networks. Thys stared at it. The level of detail was extraordinary. "How did you get this?" she asked. "You shared your battle data with us," Cole said. "My analysts have spent the last 6 weeks studying it. Every engagement, every tactic, every weapon the Drenari used." He paused. "Commander, I will be honest with you. If you go back out there with the same ships, the same weapons, the same tactics, You will lose again. The Draenari have already adapted to the way you fight. They know your patterns. They will be ready. The room was silent. Thys felt the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She had known it in her gut since Orin's drift, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. "What do you suggest?" she asked. Cole looked at Vargas. She stood up and began to speak. "We have been doing more than just repairing your ships," she said. "We have been studying them, learning how they work, and we have been thinking about how to make them better." She activated another display. It showed a cross-section of hull plating, 2 layers side by side. One was the standard Velrothi alloy. The other was something new. "This is a hybrid material," Vargas explained. "Your alloy bonded with a carbon nanotube lattice that we have been developing for our own aerospace programs. It is 40% lighter than your current armor. It absorbs and disperses energy weapon impacts far more efficiently, and it is stronger." She played a simulation of weapons fire hitting both materials. The standard Velrothi alloy cracked and buckled. The hybrid material flexed, absorbed, and held. From the corner of the room came a sharp voice. "No." Everyone turned. Chief Weapons Officer Goran Sal stood with his arms crossed. He was tall, even for a Velrathi, and his face was carved from years of war and pride. He had served the fleet for longer than most humans had been alive, and he did not appreciate being told that his ships were not good enough. "Our armor has served us for 400 years, Goran said. "It has protected us across 1,000 battles. And now you, a species that has never left its own planet, want to tell us it is not sufficient?" Vargas looked at him without flinching. She was a full meter shorter than Goran, but she met his gaze like she was looking at an equal. "Your armor is beautiful work," she said. "Truly, your engineers are brilliant. But brilliance does not make something perfect. Your alloy has a bonding weakness under sustained thermal stress. Your own engineers knew about it. They accepted it. We did not." Goran's jaw tightened. "You speak of things you do not understand." "Then let me understand," Vargas said. "Test it, right now. Take our hybrid armor and your standard armor. Shoot both of them with the most powerful weapon on this ship. If yours performs better, I will apologize and never mention it again." Goran stared at her. Then he nodded once, sharply. They conducted the test that afternoon, in a cargo bay cleared for the purpose. 2 panels, side by side. Goran himself operated the weapon, a high-energy beam cutter used for ship-to-ship combat. He fired at the standard Velrothi panel first. It held for 3 seconds, then cracked, then shattered. Then he fired at the hybrid panel. It glowed, it flexed, it held. He kept firing. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The panel was hot and scorched, but it did not break. He stood very still for a long time, looking at the panel. Then he turned to Vargas. "Your engineering is crude," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "It is stubborn." "Yes." He looked at the panel again. Something changed in his face. Not defeat, something closer to respect. "Tell me about the weapon upgrades," he said. That opened the door. Over the next 2 weeks, the humans presented upgrade after upgrade. A team from Earth's most advanced research institutions unveiled an electronic warfare system. Humans, it turned out, had spent decades fighting each other using signals, codes, jamming, and deception. Their electronic warfare technology was crude compared to galactic standards in some ways, but in other ways it was terrifyingly creative. They thought like tricksters. They did not just try to overpower enemy signals. They confused them, corrupted them, turned them into nonsense. Adapted to Draenari communication frequencies, the system could tear apart enemy fleet coordination. Then came the weapons. The Velrothi fought with precision. One shot, one target, maximum power. It was the way they had always fought. The humans proposed something different. They called it distributed firepower. Instead of one powerful cannon, they suggested fitting each ship with dozens of rapid-fire kinetic batteries alongside the existing beam weapons. The Draenari build their shields to handle your beam weapons, explained a human weapons specialist. They tune their defenses to one type of attack. If you hit them with two types at once, from multiple directions, their shields cannot adapt fast enough. You overwhelm them. Gorin had initially resisted every change. But after the armor test, he listened. And the more he listened, the more he understood. These humans were not trying to replace Velrathi engineering. Something wild and unpredictable and dangerously effective. The most difficult conversation came last. General Cole stood before Thys and made a request she had not expected. 200 of our people want to join your fleet, he said. Military advisors, engineers, tactical specialists, volunteers, all of them. Thys shook her head. This is not your war, General. Commander, Cole said, and his voice was quiet but firm. We have seen what is out there now. We know about the Draenari. We know what they do to the species they conquer. If they defeat you, they do not stop. They keep going. Eventually, they reach us. He paused. Let us help. Not because we owe you. Because it is the right thing to do. Thys looked at him for a long time. She thought about the soldiers she had lost. She thought about the ones she might still lose. And she thought about these humans, who had known about the stars for barely 6 weeks and were already ready to fight for them. Very well, she said. 200. The day before departure, Thys walked through the sorrow of Keth alone. She moved slowly, running her hands along the walls, feeling the ship around her. It was the same ship she had commanded for 15 years. The same corridors, the same rooms, the same bones. But it was different now. The walls were lined with hybrid armor. New weapon arrays sat in housings along the hull. Strange human screens glowed beside Velrathi controls. 2 kinds of engineering, woven together. The ship felt alive in a way it never had before. It felt strong. It felt ready. Thys stopped at a window and looked out at the fleet. 97 ships, all upgraded, all restored, all carrying something new inside them. Human technology, human ideas. Human stubbornness, she whispered to herself, alone in the corridor, with the stars watching through the glass. What have they made us? She did not have the answer yet, but the Draenari would find out soon enough. The Reformation fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Oran sector, and the stars that greeted them were the same stars that had watched them flee 3 months ago. Thys stood on the bridge of the sorrow of Keth and felt the memory of that retreat like a scar. She remembered the burning ships, the screaming on the communications channels, the terrible silence that followed when ship after ship went dark. She would not run again. Sensor report, she said. Lirith's hands moved across his console. 612 Draenari warships, Commander. They have fortified the sector. Defense platforms at all major points. Their flagship, the Fist of Dreth, is at the center of the formation. 600 against 97. The numbers had not changed much from the last battle, but everything else had. On the other side of the sector, aboard the Fist of Dreth, Warlord Dreth Movan received the report of the approaching fleet with something close to amusement. He was a massive creature, even by Draenari standards, with thick armored skin and eyes like dark stones. He had crushed the Velrathi once before. He had studied their tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses. They were predictable. They were elegant, precise, and predictable. The broken ones return, he said to his officers. How thoughtful. We will not have to hunt them down. He ordered his fleet into standard attack formation. 600 ships spread out like the jaws of a great beast, ready to swallow the Velrathi whole. He gave the order to fire. The first volley was enormous. Hundreds of concentrated energy lances, the Drenari's signature weapon, streaked across the void and slammed into the Reformation fleet. The beams were powerful enough to tear through Velrathi armor like claws through cloth. Dreth had seen it happen before. He expected to see it happen again. The beams hit. The Reformation fleet shuddered. And then the sensor data came back, and the bridge of the Fist of Dreth went very quiet. Negligible damage across the entire fleet. The armor had held. What? Dreth said. It was not a word he used often. Their whole composition has changed, one of his officers reported, voice uncertain. The energy signature is different. The beams are being absorbed and dispersed. Our weapons are not penetrating. Dreth stared at the display. Something cold moved through his chest, but he pushed it down. Increased power. All ships. Full bombardment. The Drenari fleet fired again. Everything they had. The void between the fleets lit up with enough firepower to crack a moon. It struck the Reformation fleet like a hammer. The fleet held. On the bridge of the Sorrow of Keth, Thys allowed herself one small breath of relief. The hybrid armor was working exactly as Vargas had promised. The beams hit, and the new plating absorbed the energy, spread it across the surface, and bled it away as heat. The ships glowed, but they did not break. Lieutenant Sharma, Thys said, begin Phase 2. Lieutenant Priya Sharma sat at a console that had not existed on this ship 3 months ago. It was covered in human screens and controls, wired directly into the ship's communication systems. Sharma was young, dark-haired, and calm in the way that certain soldiers are calm, the kind of calm that comes not from the absence of fear, but from its complete mastery. Activating electronic warfare suite, she said. Broadcasting now. What happened next was invisible to the eye, but devastating in its effect. The human electronic warfare system reached out across the void and touched every Drenari communication channel at once. It did not simply block the signals. It corrupted them. It twisted them. It fed false data into the Drenari network, making ships think they were receiving orders that had never been given. It turned clear communication into a storm of confusion. On the Fist of Dreth, alarms began screaming. Officers shouted over each other. Half the fleet reported receiving orders to change formation. The other half reported that communications were down entirely. Ships began drifting out of position, unsure of what to do, unsure of what was real. What is this? Dreth roared. Restore communications. We cannot, his communications officer said. The signal corruption is adaptive. Every time we clear a channel, it changes and corrupts it again. We have never seen anything like this. Thys watched the Drenari formation begin to fracture, and gave her next order. All ships, open fire. The Reformation fleet attacked, but it was not the attack the Drenari expected. It was not the careful, precise, single-target strikes that the Velrathi had always used. Instead, every ship in the fleet unleashed everything at once. Beam weapons fired in coordinated bursts, while the new kinetic batteries roared alongside them, sending thousands of high-velocity projectiles screaming across the void. The Drenari shields were designed to handle one type of weapon. They were tuned to absorb energy beams. They could not absorb energy beams and deflect kinetic projectiles at the same time. The shields flickered, overloaded, and collapsed, and then the dual bombardment hit bare hull. Drenari ships began to die. Goran Sol stood at the weapons command station and fired with a grim smile on his face. He had spent 2 weeks learning the new systems, drilling his crews, running simulations. He had complained about every change, questioned every modification. But now, watching the kinetic batteries tear holes in ships that his beam weapons could never have touched alone. He understood. The humans had not replaced his weapons. They had unleashed them. "Target the command ships," Thys ordered. "Break their coordination." It was already broken. Without communication, the Drenari fleet was a collection of individual ships, each fighting alone, each making its own decisions. Some tried to retreat. Some charged forward blindly. Some fired on each other by mistake, as the jamming fed them false identification data. Thys saw the chaos, and made her next move. It was a tactic Sharma had taught her, something humans had used in their own wars for thousands of years. Thys ordered the center of her fleet to fall back, slowly, deliberately, as if weakening. The flanks held position. Dreth saw the center retreating, and did what any aggressive commander would do. He pushed forward, driving his ships into the gap. It was instinct. It was what he had been trained to do. Pursue weakness. Crush it. But the weakness was not real. It was a trap. When the Drenar center pushed deep enough, Thys gave the signal. The flanks of the Reformation fleet closed in from both sides like the jaws of a vice. The retreating center stopped and turned. The Drenar found themselves surrounded, trapped in a killing box, with enemies on every side. The human repair drones, Tanaka's swarm logic machines, worked throughout the battle. Whenever a ship took damage, the drones swarmed to the breach and sealed it in minutes. Ships that would have been lost in any other battle stayed in the fight, patched and functional, refusing to die. The Battle of Orin's Drift 2 lasted 4 hours. When it ended, over 400 Drenari ships were destroyed or captured. The Reformation fleet had lost 9. On the burning bridge of the Fist of Dreth, Warlord Dreth Movan sat in his command chair and stared at the sensor data as his ship shuddered around him. His fleet was gone. His formation was gone. Everything he knew about war had been proven wrong in a single afternoon. "Analyze the foreign technology signatures," he ordered, his voice hoarse. His surviving analyst worked through the data with trembling hands. "The hull modifications, the weapon systems, the jamming technology. They are not Velrothi in origin. They come from an unknown source." "What source?" "A planet designated Sol 3. It is listed in the galactic records as a Category 7 world. Pre-interstellar, primitive." Dreth said nothing for a long time. He looked at the wreckage of his fleet scattered across the void, destroyed by weapons that came from a world of primitives who had never left their own star system. For the first time in his long and bloody career, Warlord Dreth Movan felt fear. Not of the Velrathi. He had fought the Velrathi his whole life. He felt fear of whatever was living on that small blue planet, that world of creatures who had never seen the stars, and yet had changed the shape of a galactic war. His final transmission to the Drenari High Command was short. "Do not go near Sol 3. Do not provoke them. Do not make them look at us." Then his ship was boarded, and the war changed forever. The news of the Battle of Orin's Drift 2 traveled across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. It moved through military channels and diplomatic networks, through trading posts and smuggler routes, through whispered conversations in the halls of 100 worlds. A defeated fleet had returned from the edge of known space and crushed an enemy twice its size. And it had done so using technology from a planet nobody had ever heard of. Within weeks, the war changed shape. Drenari forces pulled back from 4 key systems, not because they were defeated there, but because they were afraid. Their commanders looked at the data from Orin's Drift and could not understand it. The Velrathi had been broken. They had been finished, and then they had come back with new armor that could not be cracked, new weapons that could not be defended against, and a jamming system that turned Drenari communications into noise. Where had it come from? How had it happened? The answer, when it reached the Drennerai High Command, made them go quiet. A pre-interstellar world, a species still bound to its own planet. And yet, they had reverse-engineered alien technology in weeks, improved it, and built weapons that changed the outcome of a galactic war. The Drennerai did not understand this. They were a species built on strength and domination. They understood power. But they did not understand a species that could do what the humans had done. So they retreated, not from the Velrothi, from the idea of Earth. 3 months after the battle, Thys was summoned to the Velrothi homeworld. She had not been home in nearly 2 years, and the sight of Velroth from orbit made her chest ache. It was a silver-blue world, cold and beautiful, with great ice plains and deep oceans. She had been born there, had grown up watching the auroras dance across the polar skies. It felt like a lifetime ago. The High Council met in the Hall of Reflection, a great chamber carved from a single mountain crystal. 20 council members sat in a half-circle, their faces grave and curious. Thys stood before them and told them everything. She told them about the fleet's arrival at Earth, about the message she had sent, and the response she had received. She told them about the 11-day miracle, about the engineers and scientists, about Vargas and Tanaka and Cole and Sharma. She told them about the hybrid armor and the jamming system and the kinetic batteries. She told them about the music in the medical bays and the food the humans had shared and the way they sat with the wounded and refused to leave. When she finished, the eldest member spoke. "You are telling us," he said slowly, "that a primitive species, one that has never traveled beyond its own moon, repaired our fleet in 6 weeks, improved our technology, and sent volunteers to fight in a war that was not theirs. And they did this because you asked for help." "No," Thys said. "I asked for materials. They gave us everything else on their own." The council exchanged glances. There was admiration in their eyes, but there was also something else. Unease. "A species that learns this fast," another council member said quietly. "A species that adapts this quickly. What happens when they build their own ships? When they enter the galaxy not as helpers, but as a power in their own right?" Thys had thought about this. She had thought about it many times during the long journey home. "Then we had better make sure they enter as our friends," she said. Before the council could respond, a message arrived. Ambassador Yeel Soreth of the Galactic Council was requesting an audience. He had traveled from the Central Worlds, specifically to discuss the Sol 3 situation. Soreth was a tall, thin being, from a species known for its diplomacy and its caution. He arrived at the Hall of Reflection with 2 assistants and a face full of concern. He was polite, but direct. "The Galactic Council is aware that an unregistered species has been involved in the Velrothi-Drenari conflict," he said. "This is a violation of the non-contact protocols. Category 7 worlds are protected precisely because they are not ready for galactic involvement." Thys stepped forward. "With respect, Ambassador, those protocols were written for worlds that need protection. Earth does not need our protection. If anything, they protected us." "Commander, the protocols exist for good reason. Pre-interstellar species are vulnerable. Introducing them to galactic conflict could destabilize their entire civilization." "Their civilization is not destabilized," Thys replied. "It is united. For the first time in their history, every nation on that planet is working together. They are not confused or frightened. They are building." Soreth insisted on visiting Earth himself. Thys accompanied him. They arrived to find a planet transformed. The Velrothi event, as the humans called it, had changed everything. The old divisions, the borders and arguments and rivalries that had defined human history had not disappeared entirely. But they had become smaller, less important. The people of Earth had looked up and seen that they were not alone, and the sight had rearranged their priorities. International space programs had merged into a single organization. Scientists from every country worked side by side, studying the Velrothi technology, not just replicating it, but pushing it further. In orbit around the planet, Thys could see the skeletal frames of new ships. Human ships. They were rough and unfinished, ugly by galactic standards, built with the same stubborn, graceless determination that humans brought to everything. But they were real. General Cole met them on the surface. He shook Soreth's hand and led him through a facility where human engineers were building the first generation of interstellar engines. Soreth watched in disbelief. These engines should have taken decades to develop. The humans had built working prototypes in 3 months. How is this possible? Soreth asked. We had good teachers, Cole said, nodding toward Thys, and we are fast learners. Later, in a private meeting, Soreth confronted Cole about the implications of what Earth was doing. You understand, Soreth said carefully, that the Galactic Council may have concerns about a new species entering the interstellar community so rapidly. There are processes, evaluations, steps that must be followed. Cole looked at him. He was calm and steady, his hands folded on the table. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Ambassador, we helped the Velrothi because it was the right thing to do. We are not asking for a seat at your table. We are not asking for permission. We are building our own chair, and we will sit down whether you pull one out for us or not. Soreth was silent for a long time. He looked at Cole, then at Thys, then out the window at the construction frames in orbit. Thys was allowed to read it. Sol 3 is not a Category 7 world, Soreth wrote. I recommend immediate reclassification to Category 2, Emergent Apex Civilization. The species known as humans are not yet among the stars, but they will be within a single generation. They are industrious, adaptive, creative, and dangerously compassionate. When they arrive on the galactic stage, they will remember who treated them as equals, and they will remember who did not. The Galactic Council should act accordingly. 2 days later, the Reformation fleet departed Earth for the front lines. Thys stood on the observation deck of the Sorrow of Keth, and watched the blue planet grow smaller in the viewport. But this time, the fleet did not travel alone. Beside the Velrothi warships, a squadron of human-built escort frigates flew in formation. They were small, rough, and loud. Their engines burned too hot, and their hulls were welded thick where they should have been smooth. They were the ugliest ships Thys had ever seen. They were also the most beautiful. She opened a channel to the entire fleet, Velrothi and human ships alike. Every crew member, every soldier, every engineer and medic and volunteer. She thought about what she wanted to say. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, from defeat and despair to something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. She spoke. Let it be known, she said, and her voice carried across every ship. We came to Earth broken, and they made us whole. We came asking for metal, and they gave us thunder. We came as strangers, and they called us friends. The Dreneri wanted to know what species changed this war. Tell them. Tell everyone. Through the viewport, the human frigates burned bright against the stars, racing forward with the same reckless, stubborn, impossible energy that defined everything their species did. The humans are coming. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished into the stars, leaving behind a blue planet full of people who were already building the next fleet, and the next.